In this clip I'm going to deal with a very important issue that has to be discussed and dealt with. There's too much political correctness infiltrating all aspects of our life. And I wish to make a case that the Abrahamic faiths are under attack by a maltheist gnosticism. We are dealing with people who believe that who we call the God of Abraham is an evil entity and that there is a true God somewhere in the background just waiting to return to us and accessing us when the conditions on this earth are right. Apparently, the God of Abraham is stopping this other so-called greater God from accessing us, which is a contradiction when you think about it. Because if the God of the maltheists was so great, then wouldn't he be here already? So the Abrahamic faiths are under attack through infiltration. And when you look at it, is Judaism, Christianity and Islam are seemingly cutting their own throats just for the hell of it. And if they're not cutting their own throats, then they're looking to cut the throats of those of other Abrahamic faiths. So we have to deal with the root cause of all this. And I'm going to deal with Judaism. And so I've made some notes on paper, and I'm just going to really do this on the fly. But these things have to be talked about. They have to be dealt with. We are being sold a fictitious story as pertaining to world history, the existence of God. We are dealing with a multi-pronged attack. And for some unknown reason, people just seem to go with the flow and accept whatever lies, propaganda they are being fed. So let us deal with what is Judaism. I put this as point number 1. So what is Judaism? Now Judaism should be, according to ancient times, the series of practices and worship to the God of Abraham as was brought forth by Moses when he led the Israelites out of Egypt and into what is now Israel. And, giving that there may have been various adaptations from when the Israelites went through the Sinai and into Israel and finally settled down. That is the core of the religion of what Judaism as we know it is supposed to be. But as we see now, Judaism is, I don't know what to call it. It has nothing to do with the God of Abraham. Out of all the Jewish beliefs, you have the ultra-Orthodox, but they only consist of about 5% of the world's Jews. and the ultra-Orthodox are anti-Zionist, and which is the actual correct practice. There's not supposed to be a state of Israel until the Messiah or Moshiach returns. But now we do have a physical state of Israel, which was brought about by Zionism, which is not religious in the slightest. It is an atheist creed. And this has implications as we understand now. We have all manner of fighting, all manner of animosity because of it. And it is nothing to do with actual Judaism, but rather it is to do with Jewishness. Now, point number 2. What are Jews and what is Jewishness? Well, Jewishness is not a race. There's no single culture to it. And really, it does not have a religion to it. Because when you look at it on a racial thing, on a racial basis, there are many races of people who proclaim to be Jewish. You have Ashkenazi Jews who for some reason call themselves Ashkenazi, even though they don't need to have a religious belief of any sort. So they're not really, they are self-declared as a sect of Judaism, but you don't have to be an actual practicing Judaist to be a member of Ashkenazi. All you need is a Jewish mother. That's it. That's all you need. So you've got the Ashkenazi, the Sephardic, Falasha. So the Sephardic are they don't pertain to any particular country. And the Falashas are from Ethiopia, which is probably the only bona fide sect of, or say grouping of Jewishness that comes from a single country. Ashkenazis are nothing to do with ancient Israel. In fact, 99.9% of the world's Jews have no relation whatsoever to Moses or the tribe that came with him. These people are descendants of converts. Ashkenazis actually came from what is now known as Ukraine. Though when you look at it from a racial point of view as to who they resemble, they actually resemble Georgians and Chechens. These people are not from the Middle East. As for the Sephardics, they are the descendants of Berber and Iberian, or if you want to say Spanish and Portuguese, converts. That's it, nothing to do with the Middle East. Falashas are Ethiopian Jews, and they most probably are descendants from the kingdom of Sheba, though they really retain no ancient ancestry in a racial sense. You also have various, let's call them what they are, fraudsters, claiming to be Chinese Jews, Indian Jews, no relation whatsoever. You find these Jews suddenly appear in various places around the world, even though there's no way on earth they could be related to Moses or his tribe. All they're really doing is claiming to be Jewish in order to move to Israel, and that's about it. So the only people who are possible descendants of the tribe of Moses are what's called Musawis or Musawis, and they are Palestinian Jews. They are Arabs who happen to be of the Judaist faith. And the PLO Charter of 1967 recognizes that 5% of the Palestinian population is in fact Judaist, and they shall be recognized as Palestinians. Unfortunately, these days, Musawis get put in the category of Sephardic. Why? Probably because they have black hair, and olive complexion or similar. The only other people who could have some relation to the ancient inhabitants of what is now Israel are the Samaritans, but they are pretty much extinct. So really, when you look at it, Israel does not have any descendants of the people that are the basis for creating the state of Israel. It is a fraud. And Jewishness, when you look at it, is nothing to do with race, it's nothing to do with religion. As you have people now call themselves Messianic Jews. They say, oh, we believe in Jesus, but we're still Jewish. But if you believe in Jesus, wouldn't you just call yourself a Christian? So, as long as you are of a Jewish mother, it does not matter. You can be Judaist, you could be Christian, you can even be Muslim. You can be atheist, and there's a hell of a lot of that within the Jewish world, so to speak. And indeed, there is a great deal of atheism. So, well, let's go to the next point. Point 3. Anti-Semitism versus anti-Semitism. If you say anti-Semite, that is anti-Semite, that means you don't like Assyrians, you don't like Hashemite Jordanians. It means you don't like, I suppose you can say Palestinian Arabs for that matter. But when you say anti-Semite as one word, no hyphen, that's a different thing altogether. Where anti-Semitism, one word, simply means Jew hatred, and yet it does not define what a Jew actually is. So, one thing you should particularly take note of is that if you insult a Jew, you are accused of anti-Semitism. And yet, if I insult, let's say, an Assyrian because he's Assyrian, anti-Semitism definition or any laws pertaining to that does not protect him. It doesn't come into it. So I can insult an actual Semite. I could be called a racist or charged with hate speech or whatever. But I can't be charged with anti-Semitism even though he is a Semite. That's because the hyphen makes all the difference. So you can insult Semitic people but yet not be anti-Semite, and yet you can insult a Jew who isn't a Semite and be charged with anti-Semitism. It's, this is why these things should be talked about. We are dealing with something that is really turning the world on its head. We're dealing with reversal of order. And anyway, these things will come together. Okay, point 4, Zionism. Now, Zionism is nothing to do with Judaism. In fact, Judaism would oppose Zionism, because in Judaism, Israel cannot be restored until the Messiah or Mashiach returns. Zionism, which is an atheist faith or an atheist creed, says it doesn't matter because God doesn't exist. But we can do this because we are God. This is what we are dealing with. Now, I saw the David Icke clip. He calls it Rothschild Zionism, in which the Rothschild empire, so to speak, has taken Israel and has used it as its own personal fiefdom. And when you look at it, it does seem to act for that purpose. Now, with the state of Israel now existing, now in theory all Jews are supposed to return to Israel, back to their homeland, because God said so. Or that's what God said, or some prophet said. But the only people turning up to Israel are refugees from poorer countries, which Israel doesn't want. People claiming to be Jewish, so they can turn up in Israel and they stay in Israel until they can make their way to Europe. So, it is quite, I suppose you could say, satanic. We have an atheist state which was supposedly ordained by God, for which the Jews can't say who God actually is, or do not want to say who he is. And we have the world tithing an atheist state because they believe that's what God wants. You have Christian Zionism, which is something that's really, I don't know what sort of mental illness to call it. They believe the Jews worship God, the Christians worship Jesus, Muslims worship the moon, and we have to give all our money to Israel because that's what God wants. And you say the Jews worship God, so Jesus isn't God. Oh yeah, Jesus is God. But God wants us to give money to Israel, to atheists. That doesn't add up in the slightest, and yet people just continually, I don't know what to call it. I truly do not know what to call it. It is a willing servitude. You know. So, you know, this is a problem. No, for this. Okay, if we look at Judaism or Jewishness, now, I'll just go on and tell you this. So we've got 5% of the Jewish population in Israel, which is ultra-Orthodox. They are anti-Zionist. They do not believe in the state of Israel because the Messiah has not yet returned. They say this is wrong, that Israel has established itself, especially an atheist state. And I suppose they go there because they want to be close to Temple on the Mount and things of that nature. So what about the other 95%? Well, when you look at the people who measure their Jewishness, they measure their Jewishness by their mother. If they're of a Jewish mother, then they are of a Jewish bloodline. The religion plays no part whatsoever in it. You could probably say, 50% are atheist, 25% identify as Jewish by tradition, not by, well, you can't even say tradition, because they do not especially adhere to Judaism. They define themselves as being Jewish by culture. But as the different sects of Jewishness have their own cultures because they are based on different racial groupings, you have to look at, when you look at this, right, it doesn't make sense, right? If I start eating bagels and chicken soup, does that make me a Jew? No. If I start speaking Hebrew, does that make me a Jew? No. And let's look at the other languages now with Jewishness, that being Yiddish and Ladino, which are not Semitic in the slightest. So learning those languages does not bring you any closer to being Jewish. It may be a step, but you have to go through a whole rigmarole in order to do so. Now, if you go to a synagogue and let's say you want to convert to Judaism, there's a process you have to go through. You have to study under a rabbi. It may be for 1 year, though I have heard of it being 3 years. Then, after that, you have to go to a bet din, which is a type of panel for those on the judgment panel to decide whether or not you are good enough to be a Jew. And I've been told a story by one guy, and he had no reason to make this up. It was actually his son married a Jewish woman, and he decided to convert to Judaism, and he even went so far as to get his foreskin cut off his penis. So, but does that make him a Jew? You know, he might be considered as good as, but he's not of a Jewish mother. Although his children would be considered Jewish because they would be of a Jewish mother. So, you convert to Judaism, but you are not of a Jewish mother. So, you would be a spiritual Jew, not a physical Jew. See, if you are of a Jewish mother, then you can be, Christian, Muslim, atheist, Hindu, whatever. You're still a Jew because it is a bloodline. Jewishness is more, well, as the Jews say, it is tribal. It is a tribal thing. Myself, I believe it's in a way tribal, but quite frankly, I believe it's a lot worse. Well, if you look at, suppose you'd say, let's look at the mafia. Right, the mafia is not just one family, it is a whole heap of different families which run their own crime gangs. Now, to be in the mafia, it is expected that you be of Italian descent. So, if you're to say all mafia is Italian, but you can't say that all Italians are mafia. In fact, the mafia would be an infinitesimally small percentage of Italians. So really, what I see Jewishness as is more or less along the lines of gypsies. It is not a single race, though it is classified as a tribe. Anyway, back onto the religious part. So, if we can say that 3/4 of, Jewishness is, atheist or just lip service, going through motions in order to appear Jewish, and we say 5% are ultra-Orthodox. So what about the other 20%? And actually, you could consider this more disturbing on how they see the God of Abraham. And this is to do with pantheism. That is the belief that God is in everything. No, God is in you, God is in me, God is in the guy down the road, God is in the cat, the dog, the grasshopper, everything. And do I believe this has anything to do with Moses? No, I certainly do not. But it is this, the interpretations of the likes of the non-Semite Jews, who are 99.99%, that have caused the corruption of Judaism. Myself, I would say, the term Judaism is has become pretty much redundant. If I was ultra-orthodox, I would refer to myself as being of the Mosaic faith. That's pretty accurate, you know, give or take for a few things that may have come along the line. But if you're adhering to the ancient texts and the ancient teachings, Mosaic faith would be more honest. As for everyone else, I don't know what I would call them. They just have this tribal creed of Jewishness, which really doesn't, it is not a singular unit which you could examine. So pantheism, amongst Judaism, especially the very liberal leaning congregations, is more in line with something you'd expect in, Christian terms. And we're not really talking Christianity, things like Unitarianism, the Unity type church, where you just make up your own beliefs. You don't have to adhere to anything. It's really difficult to explain. Would I say, this type of Judaism has anything to do with Moses, Jacob, the God of Abraham, Isaac? Not at all. Not at all in the slightest. Would I say that it has a lot to do with Gnosticism, and especially the maltheist Gnosticism? Yes, it does. It certainly does. So the concern is, right, so we have Judaism, after which came Christianity, and then Islam. So you've got Judaism, Christianity, Islam. So if Judaism goes, bang, it's like a Jenga block. And this is what I want to point out, that the Abrahamic faiths are under attack, and they are successfully under attack. Now, so if you want to ask me, what do I make of Jewishness? I would say it in the same context as, say, gypsies. Now, gypsies supposedly originated from India, and somehow they ended up in Egypt, and they ended up in Europe. And it's basically just a mob of people. They might have had some sort of racial or caste foundation, but along the line, when you look at it now, they have no relation to the people of India, or really anyone else. And if you look at what in the British Isles, what they call travellers, who claim to be gypsies, but are in no way related. No, there might be some very small percentage here and there. But these people obviously are not of any sort of Indian ancestry. And you have to look at, what are these people, what are they actually? And I'll say it, what we're dealing with are people who are the rejects of all societies, of all nations that they've passed through. So, gypsies are the rejects of countries from India to, I don't know, Germany, or all of Europe, for example. And the people we call Jews now are the same. They're rejects from all through Europe and North Africa. These are people who just could not fit into any society of any country they passed through or resided in. And they may have chosen to go between countries for, I know, opportunity, or they may have been booted out. In a lot of cases they weren't. I suppose, in an American context, you would say these people are Section 8 rejects. And so they do not belong in Israel because they have no relation to Israel. And they have relation to Zionism. And that's only on a tribal basis. So we are dealing with a very bastardized background. And let's be honest. People who identify themselves as being Jews, they hate Christianity. Oh, sure, you got the Messianic Jews who won't call themselves Christians for some unknown reason. And we have to look at the Jewish culture of this present moment and where it possibly emanated from and how it is retaining itself. So let's deal with Sabbateanism, and which went on to Frankism, the Dome Muslims, or I should say Muslims, of the Ottoman Empire, and we also deal with the Marranos, who converted to Christianity. I mean, this has some form, but what you notice about these crypto Jews, and this is the thing, they don't actually practice anything Mosaic. And you have to ask, what are they actually practicing? But they hate Jesus. No, they really do. And we can see in Europe at the moment what's called a de-Christification of Europe. And, at the moment you have two Jews. First one, Aneta Kahane, who is in Germany, a former Stasi agent, who's, seems like her entire purpose is to flood Germany with non-whites, because she believes that whites are evil. And number two, Barbara Lerner Specter. She's in Sweden, again another country which is being flooded with non-whites. And she's of the same belief. Though, one thing to consider with Barbara Specter is that her husband is a rabbi. I believe he's called a Masorti rabbi, which is supposedly a conservative sect of Judaism, but that only applies to Jews. The type of Judaism you have now is for Jews only. If you're not of a Jewish mother, then you don't cut the grade. So you've got the likes of Barbara Spector preaching all this left-wing crap, open borders, white women should jump into bed with black men, the white race has got to go. And yet her husband, the rabbi, says, oh no, Jews have to be conservative, we have to preserve the tribe. We're really dealing with some evil stuff here. This is maltheism. It is a perverted, malevolent gnosticism. We are not dealing with descendants of Moses. We are dealing with the scum and the shit of every country. Whether it be in Europe, whether it be in the Caucasus, the Middle East and North Africa. This is what we're dealing with. All these bastards have managed to gang up together, and they are completely devoid of any spirituality. And their spirituality is political correctness. Does it apply to them? For the most part, no. But we're going to have to deal with some aspects of the occult here. And so just bear with me while I go through this. Now I will deal with the issue of Sabbateanism, or just the Sabbateans. And this is a very important part. It is, from what I can gather, the establishment of what you could say full-blown Gnosticism into Judaism. Using some information from Wikipedia, which I think is quite correct and quite straight to the point, I will point out who Sabbatai Zevi was and how he affects the world today. Now, Sabbatean is a general term, though it does involve some complexities. It refers to a variety of disciples and believers in Sabbatai Zevi. He lived from 1626 to 1676. He was a Jewish rabbi who was proclaimed to be the Jewish Messiah in 1665 by Nathan of Gaza. So, as I understand the history of it, Sabbatai Zevi did not proclaim himself to be the Messiah or Moshiach of Jews at first. He seemed to believe he was, but it was Nathan of Gaza who more or less confirmed it and was preaching this. So you've got Sabbatai Zevi, who was acting in a character mode the same as Jesus. So Nathan of Gaza was his John the Baptist, so to speak. And vast numbers of Jews in the Jewish diaspora accepted his claims, even after he became a Jewish apostate, it should be Judaistic apostate, with his conversion to Islam in 1666. Sabbateans of his followers, both during his messiahship and after his conversion to Islam, are known as Sabbateans. And this is something else you have to take in. Now, if some guy goes around saying he's the saviour of the Jewish people, and he was only preaching at Jewish people, now, if he renounces Judaism and becomes a Muslim, which he did because the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire was getting jack of his movement, that is apostasy. If he was truly convinced that he was serving the God of Judaism, he would not have done so, even at the point of death, which he was threatened with by the Sultan. So he converted to Islam. And from that, you have this sect, which is known as the Donme Muslims, who are quite separate to regular practices of Islam. They don't really participate in the Ummah or the Islamic community. They are quite separate and prefer to keep amongst themselves. And it's noted that with Islamic burials, the graves are simply covered with plain dirt, but in the Donme graves they are covered with concrete, which shows that these people did not really convert to a type of Islam which the majority of people actually believed in. And we're looking at the Sabbateans, and this is also important. They can be grouped into three categories: the believers, the associates, and the warriors. And this has more of a indication on today's Judaism, and this will be dealt with a bit later on. In Jewish history, during the 2 centuries after Zavi's death in 1676, many Jews, including some Jewish scholars, who were horrified and appalled by Zavi's personal conversion to Islam, nevertheless clung on to the belief that Zavi was still the true Jewish Messiah. They constituted the largest number of Sabbateans during the 17th and 18th centuries. They were vigorously opposed and were eventually forced into hiding their beliefs. They had to go underground because the rabbis of the time, who adhered to what is known as classical Judaism, which is more in line with the teachings of Moses and those who followed him, were absolutely opposed to him. They did not see Sabbateanism as Judaism. If you ask any, well, in today's terms, any of the ultra-Orthodox, are the Sabbateans a sect of Judaism? They will say no, and that it is more of a rip-off of Christianity. And if you ask a Christian about Sabbateanism, they'll say, well, no, it's not Christian, it's some Jewish type sect. And the Kabbalah does play a large role in the Sabbatean beliefs. It is the use of magic and occult, which I do believe explains why these people not only survive, but they continue to corrupt what is commonly referred to as Judaism. And we see this every day. And this is why I believe that people must learn about Kabbalah. And it's not evil per se, it depends how you use it, as with any other type of magic. So you had Zavi, he went against traditional teachings, and he did have influence on the Jewish masses of, everywhere from Greece to Poland to, I suppose you say, the Balkan areas. It is said that at one time he was influencing as many as 1 million people. So it is understandable why the Sultan said, we cannot tolerate this anymore. So either convert to Islam or die. So from that we have, the issue of Jews converting to other religions but yet retaining their Jewishness. And this can only be because of a tribal bloodline which is passed through the mother. And Sabbateanism has influenced other sects of Judaism. The Hasidic Jews were actually accused of being undercover Sabbateans, or at least, people were suspicious of them. But Sabbateanism did revive itself, and this, in 1726, there was a birth of a man called Jacob Frank, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Sabbatai Zevi. And at its height, Jacob Frank lived from 1726 to 1791. And he was based in Poland. And at its height, there was said to be 50,000 followers of what he was teaching or claiming. But it gets interesting here. And I believe Sabbatai Zevi was actually a Gnostic, or a maltheist Gnostic. I'll continue on with this, because Jacob Frank made this claim and this rule. So, unlike traditional Judaism, which provides a set of detailed guidelines called halakha, that are scrupulously followed by observant Jews and regulate many aspects of life, Frank claimed that all laws and teachings will fall, and that the only way you can be saved is by the grace of God. And it is the obligation of each person to transgress every boundary. So, Sabbatai Zevi, his followers who do still exist today, they were renowned for things like orgies, all sorts of sinful behavior in the belief, so to speak, that this would force God, or their God, because I don't believe he worshipped the God of Abraham, to, have an end time scenario, whether it be rapture, whether it be some sort of Armageddon. And Jacob Frank, who claimed to be the reincarnation of Sabbateans, he actually renounced the Talmud, which is a good thing, because it is just opinions of various rabbis. But he said in its place should be the Torah, which is more or less the Jewish Bible, and that it should be treated in the same way, and that it should not be accepted as divine word, but opinion, and it is subject to argument. And from all of this, we can see that Sabbateanism, Frankism, these are Gnostic, maltheist, sects. They are nothing to do with the God of Abraham, and really nothing to do with, the teachings of Moses in the slightest. But they gained such influence that they have permeated all sects of Judaism today. And indeed, you have, like, synagogues do not expel atheists. In order to be kicked out of a synagogue and banned from ever entering again, you have to renounce Judaism. But renouncing God doesn't do it, because atheists are in fact welcome into synagogues. It doesn't matter. If you're born of a Jewish mother, you are still a Jew, regardless of whether you believe in God or some other entity as your God. But if you renounce Judaism, that's a different story altogether. That means you have renounced your tribal bloodline. So what is today's Judaism? Well, on the surface of it, it's, as I said before, it is a mafia type creed. And indeed it is. The mafia, in order to join it, if you are accepted into a particular family, it involves a ritual which has been alleged. I have not seen this, but you have a picture of a saint in your hands and it's set alight. Now, to any Christian, or especially any Catholic, this would be seen as blasphemy, apostasy. But no, in mafia tradition, it is the entrance. It doesn't matter. God does not matter. And this is what we are seeing in Judaism today. After Jacob Frank died, you might be thinking, well, if the reincarnation of the Messiah dies, then everyone would realise that it's just a whole big scam and that it would disappear entirely. But that didn't happen. where after Jacob Frank died, his daughter decided to have a go. She tried to package herself off as the equivalent of the Virgin Mary or something like that, and lived a five-star lifestyle. And eventually when she died, she was in debt to the tune of 3 million guilders, which was a fair whack of money in those days. And from there, well, it still didn't die. There was talk about Sevi for approximately 200 years after his death. I mean, he was still being discussed, and his ideals were being discussed, and his claim to being the Messiah was still being discussed. Despite the death of Sevi and Frank, the infection had firmly taken hold, and it just grew. In 200 years, we could be talking 7-8 generations. So, even if we just look at what Jacob Frank had, he had 50,000 followers. From that we could be looking at as many as 500,000 Sabbateans. And they dispersed all through Europe, probably the Middle East to some extent. You have to consider that Sabbatai Zevi had followers in Turkey, and he was actually exiled to, some say Albania, some say Greece, some say Macedonia. And after Greece became independent, the Sabbateans, who were now calling themselves Muslim, said to the Greeks, we want to convert to Christianity so we can stay in Greece. And the Greeks wouldn't have any bar of it. The issue of religion is not a factor. It is the issue of bloodline. It is the issue of tribalism. And so from in Turkey, it gets more interesting. Let's talk about Turkey and overthrow of the Ottoman Empire. After World War I, we had a group called the Young Turks, who, from all accounts, were actually Sabbateans or their descendants. It is said that Ataturk was of Sabbatean descent. When you look at him and the description of him, he was certainly more European than actual Turkish. And the Young Turks were responsible for massacres of Armenians and indeed Assyrians and Christians in general within the Ottoman Empire, even before the war ended and even before they overthrew the Sultan. That's one victory. The second victory, which is much more telling, was 1917 in Russia. Now, people think the Russian Revolution was just one revolution. It was actually two. The first revolution overthrew the Tsar and set up a provisional government. The second revolution was when the communists took over. They did away with the provisional government and just took over everything, and indeed started a civil war within Russia. And what a lot of historians don't want to tell you, or politically correct ones, is that the second revolution, the communist revolution, was actually led by the most part by Jews. And when they finally took all of Russia, what was the first thing they did? Make atheism the state. I suppose in a poor way of saying it would be religion. And indeed, Christianity was outlawed and especially persecuted. Islam was also prevented from being practiced. As for Judaism, officially it was illegal to practice this. And looking at it, one might say, oh, well, if they're Jews, then they would protect the religion of Judaism. But remember, you look at the Sabbateans, they were not Judaists because they did not believe in the God of Abraham. And in fact, all indications point that they believed in a gnostic maltheism. So when you look, especially during the 1800s onwards, we see a lot of, I suppose you could say, the white anti of Judaism. And the religion part, of people who call themselves Jews really doesn't come into it. Karl Marx was born a Jew of a Jewish mother. He was raised as a Christian, but was an atheist officially through his, I don't know, I suppose what you call now ideology, which he made up himself and inflicted it on others. Now this is something I would expect from a maltheist. And indeed, if you look at his poetry, the poems he wrote, especially one called Ulanem, in which he praises Satan. He's straight out, there's no mistaking for what he was doing. And indeed, from, World War I onwards, we have really seen these maltheists, and I would just refer to them as Sabbateans, because that's a encompassing term for the time being, even though they were not all Sabbateans, though the Gnostic part was always an undercurrent, it always attacked the base of the Abrahamic belief in Judaism. And we see this in modern day. We see the likes of feminism. I mean, really, real hardcore left-wing feminism. And if you look at the history of feminism, you have a look at the names of the people, the women, who are behind it. And you'll find they are mostly Jewish and mostly atheist. We see it, in racial concerns. The Jews always back anyone against a white person. And you have to ask, why are they like this? why do they call themselves Semites? Because they are not Semitic. They are just the white trash of Europe who have somehow got together through a type of mafia. That's all I can say. It is an adherence to a criminality mindset. The Gnostic part just is the glue, and calling themselves Jews is really misunderstood by most people. It has nothing to do with religion. It is everything to do with bloodline. I'll give you a comparison. You have Scientology. Now, they refer to themselves as a church, and they use the cross as a symbol. However, they are not even in the slightest bit Christian at all. They have taken symbols and terms from Christianity and just applied it to themselves. Now, the reason they call themselves a church is for tax purposes, so they can be exempt from taxation. As for the cross, there's no real reason behind it, although they can just make up anything and say, well, we've got the cross and we're a church, so you have to accept us in the same way as Christianity. And this is what the Sabbateans are doing. They have stolen bits and pieces of Judaism, of Mosaic belief, and just applied it to themselves. So you have these people calling themselves Semites even though they are not. They seem to hate white people. That's because, I would say, indigenous Europeans actually remind them, when I see them, of how far they have fallen. They know they are from, or probably most don't know, they are from the garbage of Europe. So, let's continue on. Now, you may be wondering, okay, with the Sabbateans, how did they get to the position they are in today where they can appoint political correctness, bring in all these anti-white laws, bring on anti-discrimination and anti-Semitism laws and as such. Now, there was a thing called World War II in Europe, and many people died. And Jews got killed as well. As to, you want to talk about the Holocaust, well, there's really no doubt there were Jews who were killed, either by Germans or by their neighbours during the wartime. War is war and anarchy does follow. So there were all sorts of killings. And a lot of the Jews who did get killed during World War II in Europe were what you'd call classical Judaists. That means they pretty much adhered to what they took from, the beliefs of Moses. They didn't add bits and pieces. I suppose they might have adjusted some of the practices. So they pretty much were devastated. The Sabbateans, on the other hand, They were not touched by World War II. They spent their time in the neutral countries of Turkey and Spain. In Spain they were known as Marranos, and in Turkey they were known as Dome. So they were not affected by the war at all. So when the war was over, that's when they could pounce. Devastated Jewish communities were easy prey for these people. And they flooded the world, Europe, the United States. And this is where all the problems come from. So what people think were, Jews reconstructing and resurrecting the Jewish community were in fact I suppose you could say a type of crusader, instilling Sabbateanism within Jewish communities. And we have seen now, apart, the usual flavour of Judaism in any given country was usually Ashkenazi or Sephardic. Now you've got as many sects as you want: Reconstruction, Reformist, all sorts, like tiny, I suppose you'd call them congregations. Some of them don't meet in synagogues, some of them meet in houses, which I don't have a problem with, but you don't know what's being taught. So when you look at it now, where it's really, and we've got this Gnostic maltheist jihad, which has been waged. There's no need to continue further within synagogues, so now it's expanding outside of synagogues to general society. And we can see this in, refugees turn up in Europe, and it's always Jews saying, oh, should take 1 million, should take 2 million. And they are behind the financing of it. You look at George Soros, who is a Jew, but he's an atheist. And as I understand it, so I've been told, he sold a lot of Jews down the toilet and took their stuff. And that's how he began his career. So, would I expect that from an actual Judaist to sell his supposed people down the toilet? No. Would I expect it from a Sabbatean? Oh, absolutely. Sabbateans do not regard Abrahamic Judaists as their brethren. I mean, they might share from their circumstances a Jewishness due to their mother, but that's about it. So we have to look at where all this is going. Do I believe Judaists are a problem? No. Do I believe people who happen to identify as Jews because they got a Jewish mother and actually either subscribe to atheism or some sort of maltheist belief on a problem? Oh, absolutely. It is in the same manner, with the mafia again. You have the mafia. They are generally regarded as Italian. Within the mafia, you have mafia from Sicily, you have mafia from Naples, you have mafia from Calabria. The Godfather has his bloodline, and whether they be sons, nephews, whatever, and they take prominent positions within the family, within the mafia, and they are generally Italian, or considered, Italian, and they are an extremely small minority of the Italian population. And you cannot say, well, the mafia is all Italian, so all Italians are mafia. What we're dealing with is, imagine someone raided all the low-rent trailer parks, took all the white people out, who were probably meth heads, indoctrinated them with some, say, a belief from something like the Church of Satan, and then dumped them in the middle of Africa or in the middle of Asia. And these people, will go around saying, oh, we're white, this is what we are all like. Now, the people in either Africa and Asia will not know any different. And it's, it will not be true in the slightest. And this is the situation we're up against. We can't just say, oh, anyone who is a Judaist is the same as a George Soros or a Ron Jeremy. Now, these people are Jewish, but not Judaist. And Sabbateans all have to be of a Jewish mother. They are not of the Judaist faith, but they are of Jewish mother. They are of a bloodline. They are of a tribe. It's, how do you say? It's a type of entitlement depending on who your mother is. I suppose you've endured enough and you want to get to the occult part. So, let's begin. Now, if you're looking at Sabbateans and the occult-based religion, or the Kabbalah-based religion, that he brought into being, or brought back into being, that's more important. Let's have a look at where all this magic occult factor comes into what can be called Jewishness. With Moses, he was brought up as an Egyptian prince, and the Egyptians had their own occult practices, so he would have been privy to that. The next part is pretty interesting. See, when Jesus was, on this earth, in this world, and doing his thing, raising the dead, feeding people with 2 fish and a glass of wine or whatever, there was someone who was put out of business. See, there was a certain Samaritan who went by the name of Simon Magus, and he was a sorcerer for rent, so to speak. He went around village to village, offering to do things for money. And after Jesus left this earth, Simon Magus went around trying to find out what he did that made him such, a great magician, so to speak. So he became baptized by some of the prophets, some of the apostles, who were going around villages in Israel doing their thing. And so he accepted Christianity, the belief in Jesus Christ. And then he actually brought forth a word through his actions. He offered the apostles and other believers money in order to learn the magic which he thought they did. This is what we know as simony. And Simon Magus was actually, you could categorize him as a Gnostic, which would explain why, when up against Christians, he failed dismally. Even though he had himself baptized, it didn't mean anything. Now you see where this sort of, conduct comes from. So what happened after, Simon Magus failed? Well, he got his way around. And actually at one point, the Romans, or I would say just some of them, not all, actually had him declared to be a god, because he was obviously improving his magical acts, his practices. But against Christianity, he failed big time. And so, looking at that foundation, we, some might say that the Kabbalah is straight from Moses, and for the most part, what it could be accepted as is probably true, though Moses did have some learning before he parted the Red Sea. But Moses was ordained by the God of Abraham, the only God. And what Simon Magus was doing was more along the lines of sorcery. As sorcery in a physical aspect to get results can only come from, Satan. And so we do have a background, and the reason why these say the practices of Moses have come through because they've been reconstructed. And it was actually Isaac Luria, who can be regarded as the, I suppose you would say, the father of what modern practical Kabbalah. He's the one who put it into a practical mode. People look at the likes of Madonna and Britney Spears and say, oh, they practice Kabbalah. That's Hollywood Kabbalah. It's philosophy, if anything. The magical practices are basically non-existent. Just tie the red string around your wrist to ward off the evil eye. Well, actually, the evil eye is a Turkish thing. It's just a folktale, a Turkish one. So, which leads back to Sabbateanism. So, if you want me to say, is Kabbalah perfect? It depends how you apply it. Look, I'll go through the Kabbalah. There is 4 worlds. That is 1, the world of emanation, which is called absolute. 2, the world of Bria, which is creation. 3, the world of formation, which is Yetzirah. And 4, the world of Assiah, which is the world of action, which we know as the physical world. And these are planes of existence. It's not to do with this earth we are on solely per se. Now, you have the tree of life. Now, the tree of life exists in all 4 worlds. But the tree of death, which is an inverted version of the tree of life, exists along with the tree of, so you got tree of life, tree of death. The tree of death exists with the tree of life in this world of Assiah, and they intersect, where they join up is at this earth. So what we call Malkut on the tree of life is called Lilith on the tree of death. The reason the tree of death exists is because demons are actually native to this world. They do not exist in the other 3 worlds. And so what about angels and stuff like that? No, angels are native to the other 3 worlds, not to this world. Though they can come here, but they are not resident. And with the tree of life, the Sephirah, which has different aspects as we can apply them to our lives, has a virtue and a vice. But on the tree of death, the virtue and the vice of the various Sephirah are actually reversed. And I'll give you some examples. Okay, this one is worth looking at. Okay, there's a sephir on the Tree of Life called Bina. The virtue is silence, and the vice is avarice or greed. Now, the equivalent on the Tree of Death has greed as its virtue and silence as its vice. And if we look at it, greed is a virtue on this earth now. Silence is something that should be avoided. Look, the more obnoxious you are, the more in your face, the more demanding you are. That's deemed to be good, a good virtue of you. So is greed. And if you are the sort that, like, you just want to be calm, remain silent, understand things, you're deemed an idiot. So, also, let's look at another one. And we should look at Malkut, which is called Lilith by, I suppose you say, the pro-Satan brigade. The virtue is discrimination and the vice is inertia. Now, if you say, oh, I want to discriminate, and people say, oh, you hate blacks, you hate Jews, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing to do with that. All discrimination refers to is the sort of people you choose to hang out with, the sort of practices you choose to indulge in or practice. That's all it means. You have to have personal responsibility for your life and for your actions. And what do we have now? Oh, we've got anti-discrimination laws all over. And it'll get worse. Myself, if it continues on the way it is, if you're a white woman and a black guy comes up and says, I want to have sex with you, you have to come home with me, and you say, well, no, then you are being discriminatory. Therefore you shall be arrested and end up in court. Believe me, it will get to this. Or if you're a bloke, you're walking down the street, some faggot comes up to you and says, oh, I want to take you to my place so I can fuck you in the ass. You say, no, I am not gay, I don't do those things. Oh, you're being discriminatory. It will get to that stage. And the vice of Malkut is inertia, which means a loss, I'd say a loss of confidence in oneself where one does nothing or go with the flow. And this is what we see now. This is now deemed to be a vice. No, a virtue, I should say. You look at political events and the like, and even though as obnoxious and destructive as they are, it's now deemed to be a good thing to just go with the flow. You don't say nothing. The tree of death is really taking over. And when you're looking at the likes of the Sabbateans, you've got to ask yourself, looking at the world's Jewish population, that makes 0.22% of the world's population. And you have to ask, how is it that these people have so much influence and so much power and so much wealth? the laws of mathematics would simply say that this is not possible. So, is there an occult factor in all of this? I believe there is. If you just look at the Sabbateans, who would be practicing these things, with the tree of death, and working with the tree of death is definitely demonic, which would explain how it is they've gotten so far. Now, let's look at this earth, in this world. Right, the earth we are on is composed of two aspects. The first being Tabel, which is the immanent, and the second being Haled, which is the transcendent. So with Tabel, we're looking at the inanimate. So we've got this earth, we've got like rocks, boulders, stuff like that. There's no spirit to it. With Haled, we're dealing with the spiritual aspects. Human beings, we are flesh, bone, which could be deemed inanimate, but we are also spiritual. So we are roughly, let's say, half spirit, half purely physical, which would put us in balance. And this is what Kabbalah is supposed to be about, restoring balance. But with the tree of death, we're saying the opposite. We're saying things being disrupted. So if we look at what another term you should know is called Tikkun Olam, which simply means restoration of the earth. Now, restoration of the earth, what it's supposed to be is that Adam and Eve were put on this earth in perfect balance. The earth was in perfect balance. Then you had Lilith, who actually was the snake, not Satan. Offered Eve the apple from the tree in the Garden of Eden, which really was a sephira from the tree of life. She then gave it to Adam, and then everything just went berserk. Because remember, the snake said, "Eat it and you shall be as gods." And it wasn't a piece of fruit that did this, or could have done it. So, Tikkun Olam is supposed to be the restoration of the earth in balance, as was with Adam and Eve before the fall, before they got expelled. But now we have seen that Tikkun Olam is a political thing. It's not spiritual. It's purely political. You have people pushing one world government, the mongrelization of people, and out of this, the only people who are really going to get to the top are the Sabbateans or Gnostic maltheists, because they have knowledge of the Kabbalah and the tree of death as we see it being applied. It is a reversal of order, and it's about time people ask, now, how is this coming about? We've got people who are not Semites being deemed Semitic and instituting anti-Semitic laws to protect them, even though they are not Semites. I mean, this is unbelievable. We are, look, I can do practical Kabbalah, and it's something you learn and you don't forget the principles involved. I used to be a theistic Satanist, and what I see happening now is the sort of stuff that I learned about in my practices. Look, if you want to do practical Kabbalah and let's say you go to some sort of Hollywood Kabbalah setup, give you this idea, you have to be like us, you have to be Jewish and blah blah blah. That's a lot of crap. Look, I can tell you, in the world of Assiah, practical Kabbalah can be done using the name of Christ Jesus of Bethlehem and Nazareth. So it is not exclusive to Jews, or what you should say are Tebel Jews, the physical Jews. There's just, with the Jews, there's just no special spirituality anymore. Now, what sort of religion has atheists going into synagogues to pray? That makes sense. And if you say this don't, make sense, what's the first thing that happens? You're an anti-Semite. And this is said by people who are not Semites. Yeah, look, if you really want to oppose what is going on in this world, in Assiah, there's only two ways you can do it. One is the Tebel way, that is physical, that is by means of politics, or education, or else violence. I can only see it that way. Let Jesus take care of it. No, Jesus ain't your servant, he ain't your butler. We have autonomy to make decisions, and this is what we are supposed to be about, our faith in God. But now we have inertia. People don't make decisions, they leave it to other people. Or the second option is the hair-led option. That means you've got to learn practical Kabbalah, you've got to learn magic, you've got to be prepared to use it. There's no option. Let someone else take care of it. No, you haven't got that luxury anymore. Put it this way, if you're a Christian, you are in just as bad as a bad position as the ultra-Orthodox Judaists. Christianity has been infiltrated by the Tebel Jews. We've got Christian Zionism, which is the same as saying Christian atheism. It doesn't make sense. And yet, people go to churches every Sunday and they'll say, we have to pray for Israel, we have to bless Israel. Now, ask yourself, why would it be necessary for you to bless Israel if Israel is blessed by God? because God does not bless Israel, because the state of Israel as we know it now is founded on an atheist foundation. The people who peddle Zionism are atheists. They go against the God of Abraham. And it's not only Christianity that has this, Islam actually has this problem as well. We have Wahhabi Islam. Well, in Wahhabism, you can actually be atheist, but you can't say it in a mosque. So it's not a problem. If people actually looked into the background of, Wahhabi Islam, Christian Zionism, and just Zionism and Judaism as a whole, they would see that what we are experiencing now is the greatest con job that has been pulled in existence. We are not dealing with those who adhere to the God of Abraham. We are dealing with Gnostics. We're dealing with maltheists. This is like inviting Satan to be, the God of your church. This is what it is. And looking at Judaism, they never say God. Jews never say God. They say you can only say the name of God, and that depends on the high up rabbi of the congregation of the synagogue who can say it. And you have to ask, why would you not say God? Well, if we look at the tree of death, the highest sephira on the tree of death is called Formiel. And Formiel has joint rulership by two demons. One being Satan, and Satan is a title, and the title is held by Lucifer. And the other is Moloch. Now, if there is a tikkun olam done by those who adhere to the tree of death, you can't have two gods ruling it. You could only have one. And this is yet to be decided. You've got Lucifer, who most people probably would say is a fair candidate. But you also got Moloch. And Moloch worship occurred in ancient Israel. And we see it today with the abortion industry, because the aborted babies are disposed of in the same manner as how children were disposed of in ancient Israel. That is, they were incinerated, alive, if possible. So this is okay. Let's look at it this way. In modern time, we've got a whole heap of Jews, or who are only Jewish by physical bloodline, who are descendants of converts. The Judaism they practice does not add up, because all they've been doing is picking up bits and pieces and trying to construct it into a religion. And this explains why there are differences between Sephardic practices, Ashkenazi practices, Falasha practices. Put it this way. Let's say one day I just decide I'm going to be an American Indian, for argument's sake. Now, I do not have any American Indian ancestry in me. So, the tribal legends, which would be passed on within American Indian families and their generations, would not apply to me. All I could do is go around picking up bits and pieces of, legends, practices, languages, and so on. Let's say I decide I want to be a Mohawk Indian. My tribe is Mohawk. Now, I'm not going to get in fact, I probably won't get most information firsthand about Mohawks, language, traditional practices, and so on. So all I could do is pick up, whatever practices I could, whether it be from word of mouth or through the internet or through encyclopedias. Now, whatever I couldn't pick up specifically about Mohawks, I would probably have to use legends and fables from other tribes. Now, amongst people who are not of American Indian ancestry or family or bloodline, I might be able to pull a con job on them to convince them that I am. But if I walked onto a Mohawk reservation and said, "Oh, I'm a Mohawk Indian just like you," I'd be shot down within 5 seconds, because I would not have had this information and the knowledge of practices and language and so on firsthand. I would have to try and remember stuff I've read in a book or on the web or whatever. And this is the situation we are dealing with now. If you want to say, what Jews are, have some sort of valid claim to live in what is now Israel or Palestine, I would say the Mizrahi, Middle Eastern Jews from Yemen, they probably have some sort of, claim for asylum or residence, because the situation that they're in or that they were in were too problematic for them, and probably no one would have any issue. But as for Jews from the Caucasus, from Europe, look, if people look more European than Semitic, then there's a good chance that they are more European. And this is what we're dealing with. And these are the people who are somehow deciding what Judaism is, which at best they're just picking bits and pieces up from encyclopedias and old wives' tales. These people have no right whatsoever to claim to be descendants of Moses when they most obviously are not. These people are the Scientologists of Judaism. That's the only way to put it. But I tell you, if you really want to change what is happening at the moment, you are going to have to learn Kabbalah, practical Kabbalah. And, I admit it will be difficult because you don't see good practical Kabbalah books anymore. All you get now, if you go to a occult, or more correctly, New Age bookshop, is just fluff. People worshipping cartoon characters and stupid shit like that. It'll take a while to learn, but if you learn the principles behind it, then yeah, you can do something. Anyway, you've had 2 hours of me, and you've probably had enough, and that's okay. So I'll just finish up here. And what I want to say is, it is not just a Jewish thing. All the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, are under attack by a type of gnosticism, which is a maltheism, where our religions are being infiltrated, and as in the way they conduct themselves today, this is quite obvious. So I made this clip or presentation to be distributed on CD. I'm doing it using the AVI format. So if you're seeing this on a CD, I've put in some more clips of, Jews that oppose what the Zionists are doing. The Zionists have really hijacked Judaism. It's no longer perceived by most people as an Abrahamic belief. It is either now perceived as hooked up with atheism, or this New Age maltheist gnosticism, or some type of pantheism. But all our religions have the same problem. So, if you believe in the God of Abraham, it is your crusade, jihad, whatever, to try and take our religions out of their hands. It's not a matter of just hating Jews. You probably find that a lot of people who are Jewish by maternal bloodline probably do not even realize what it is they've been born into. Just like you can't blame all Italians for the mafia. But this problem of the Gnostic maltheism is spreading, much as in the same way as the mafia is spreading. Mafia now can describe anything. You have people who are not of Italian background who are calling themselves mafia. You have the Russian mafia. You have Mexican mafia. You have Croatian mafia. And these people are not doing it for a perceived uplifting of their racial groups. They are doing it because they are criminals. And this is what we have to see Zionism as. Criminality. That's all it really is. It just happens to be that those who are caught up in it happen to be of either a Judaist faith or of a Jewish mother. these people are being held hostage by criminals, and we see this worldwide. Any Chinatown in any city around the world, you're guaranteed there's some sort of triad setup that holds the inhabitants of that Chinatown hostage, and it's being done via using their racial group. But now the racial group isn't enough for these people. They want to install it on all of us. So if you want to do something to oppose this, first of all, number one, whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn practical Kabbalah. If you want to instill fear into the Zionists, learn practical Kabbalah. Because once they realise that their sorcery system of the tree of death is being exposed, that will cause them to re-examine what they're doing, because they will actually begin to fear you. They don't fear you at the moment. We have countries all around the world, paying millions of dollars every year to Israel, for what reason, I don't know. People not only do it through their governments, but through their own churches. And for what? If you give blessings and tithings to an atheist state, what do you expect in return? And people do it and they say, oh, this is what God wants. No. People have to get more involved and stand up more and ask more questions concerning their religion. And point number two, oppose Zionism. It has nothing to do with Moses or ancient Israel or anything like that. It just isn't. It is an atheist-based creed. We should also look at exposing these atheist Jews. You cannot claim to be a Judaist and yet hold atheism as true. Let's call these people for what they really are. They are Sabbateans. They are apostates of Judaism. And actually they're quite deadly enemies to any Abrahamic faith. So, and I would say point number 4, probably the most important point. Start spreading the word. That's the only way things are going to change. You could tell people they might do something, they might do nothing, but everyone should at least have the choice. There's no other way to go about it. So, as I say to you, if you want and you can do a better clip than what I've done so far, then do it. If you want to make copies of this, do it. We have to spread the word. Because if we abandon the Khaled part, that only leaves us with Tabel. That means things have no alternative than to be bloody, painful and violent. And that's the way the world is going now. It has been tipped beyond balance. You know, God gave us autonomy, and it's about time that we made these decisions for ourselves and not let anyone else decide for us. Certainly not for material gain. So I'll end this clip now, and I'll give my email address, and whether you want to ask questions or abuse me or whatever, or just ignore me, that's your choice. So